title of this presentation is about personal resilience. And ultimately, what predicts personal resilience? And ultimately, what are those policies or what you might call interventions that would help build personal resilience? So what is personal resilience? As you can see, people tend to experience stresses in life. But some people easily bounce back from whatever adversity that comes their way. Other people don't bounce back. They're stuck in a state of stress almost constantly. There's something to be said about personal resilience. Personal resilience is very important. And as you can see from this slide, there's so much research that indicates that personal resilience plays an extremely important role in terms of enhancing positive behaviors. As it enhances personal health and well-being, it contributes to personal empowerment, it builds social order and ethical conduct, it helps sustain trust in government, wonderful, fosters a socially cohesive and mutually supportive community. We definitely need that. Personal resilience tends to decrease negative behaviors by mitigating anxiety, fear, depression, and stress. It creates a sort of a buffer that allows people to essentially deal with stress and trauma. It impedes involvement in crime, violence, and smoking. It diminishes political activism. Now, this is kind of interesting. I'm kind of fascinated by this. Diminishes political activism by reducing discontent and anger. Wow. Can we have a little bit more of a civil society in this exploding or imploding political landscape? Yes, we can. Also, the research shows that resources play a very important role in building personal resilience. Social resources, and again, this is the research. There's a body of research that shows social resources like social capital and networking and institutional support tends to contribute to personal resilience. Same thing with institutional support in terms of support from government agencies and charity organizations. It helps. Technological resources, those people can use more of information technology devices, are in a better position to build resilience. Economic resources, especially money, of course, plays a very important part in affording, accelerating people bouncing back from adversity. Also, there is quite a strong relationship between personal well-being and development of personal resilience, especially in relation not only to affective well-being, such as positive emotions, but also eudaimonic well-being, as in character strength, positive personality traits, and the like. So what we've done is to set out to demonstrate something. I attended a conference in South Africa last year, and we had this wonderful scholar by the name of Linda Theron, and she was a keynote speaker, and she talked about personal resilience in the context of intervention, youth intervention, set up all kinds of programs to help youth becoming more resilient. And I was absolutely fascinated by it. And she made the argument that environmental resources of all kinds can help build personal resilience, especially among the youth. Great. So I kind of stood up and I said, Linda, I definitely buy the idea that resources make quite a difference in terms of building personal resilience. But wait a minute, I see a lot of people, you give them all kinds of resources, economic resource, technological resource, and it doesn't make much of a difference. They still can't bounce back from trauma, from stress. They are not resilient. Resources does play an important role, but it is not the most important role. What is most important is well-being, personal well-being. What's most important and how well-being contributes to personality development, to eudaimonia, to character strength, to ultimately positive personal traits. And that's what builds resilience. It's not just resources, but what are those mediating effects that lead to personal resilience? So we set out to demonstrate this empirically. So the idea then is much research has shown that resources play a major role in personal resilience, but our study is designed to demonstrate that personal well-being and positive personal traits. And again, I'm glad that we heard something from Dimitri about personality potential, because positive personal traits very much relate to what he was talking about. So what we did is we used the European Social Survey. It's a large-scale survey, cross-national, conducted in 2012, and it's a very large scale. As you can see, more than 54,000 participants in 29 European countries. We set out to demonstrate that, again, resources does play a role, but what's more important is well-being, personal well-being, and positive personality traits are the main determinants. So the theoretical model, ultimately based on that survey, and of course we're very much restricted by those constructs and items in the survey, is as follows. So you got resources, and we identified essentially two dimensions of personal, in terms of resources, social resources in an item. An example of an item would be I receive help and support from people I'm close to. Economic resources, yes. Household total income, all sources. So this is what we captured in terms of resources from that survey. Then, in the context of personal well-being, we are able to capture items that capture 4 dimensions. I don't know whether you're familiar with Martin Seligman's idea of authentic happiness. He wrote a book on that. And he made the argument that people who are authentically happy are likely to have a good life in terms of 3 dimensions: a pleasant life, an engaged life, and a meaningful life, right? In order to experience authentic happiness, you need to have these 3 things built in you. I came along and I said, wait a minute, yeah, the pleasant life, an engaged life, and a meaningful life are absolutely essential to authentic happiness. But what's missing is a balanced life. And I wrote a paper on the balanced life, and it won the Best Paper Award in the Journal of Happiness Studies. And I made the case that a balanced life is a very important dimension of authentic happiness. So we were able to find items related to those 4 dimensions the last one, the balanced life, is I'm satisfied with the balance between time on the job and other aspects of life. So we were able to capture personal well-being in terms of those 4 dimensions. And then, again, going back to Dimitri's personality potential, again, our construct is positive personal traits. Optimism, self-esteem, autonomy, competence, continuous learnings. These were the dimensions and ultimately the items that we found in the survey of the European Social Survey. So again, we set out to demonstrate that resources, yes, affects personal resilience, but it is mediated by personal well-being. It is also mediated by positive personality trait in this fashion, right? And we were able to find items that capture personal resilience. When things go wrong in my life, it takes a long time to get back to normal. This is reverse coded. So for those people who endorse that, again, these are the people who are least resilient. I deal with important problems in life. Again, that is very straightforward. People who endorse this item are highly resilient. Data were analyzed using multi-level modeling, analytical techniques, and the results were partly supportive of the model. What do we mean by partly supportive is, yes, we got mediation in the way we hypothesized, but due to the multicollinearity in the data, again, we ended up with partial mediation. Let me show you what partial mediation looks like. This is what it looks like. So resources, yes, indeed, affects personal resilience according to the data, but and resources builds, it becomes a factor, a determinant in building personal well-being. Personal well-being, again, tends to play a very important role in building personal positive personal traits such as optimism, self-esteem, autonomy, competence, and continuous learning. And of course, that is the most important factor that, at least in my view, plays a very important role in building resilience. But according to the data, you also have direct effects. And therefore, the data shows what we call not
2
only,
minutes.
Again, the full mediation, but partial mediation in the sense that resources does have a direct effect on personal resilience. Now, what does that mean in terms of policy making or what we call interventions? For those who are so much into understanding interventions, what we can do to enhance people's well-being, happiness, and what have you, we have quite a bit of strategies and interventions out there that much of it is documented in the positive psychology literature. We call them positive psychology interventions. I like to call them well-being interventions. Now, those well-being interventions have been shown. Let me give you an example. We had Sonia Lubowski, I can't pronounce her last name. She was a keynote speaker, and she made a wonderful presentation of what gratitude, if you come up with an intervention of gratitude and loving kindness, and it makes quite a bit of difference in enhancing people's happiness. Great. What this is telling us is, yes, we need those positive psychology interventions, but we need to do better, because now we understand that resources does, yes, it makes a difference, but we need the kind of interventions that, let me read this to you because it's in black and white. Interventions should be formulated with the understanding that resources matter to the development and reinforcement of personal resilience. However, undue emphasis on resources may not be as effective compared to personal well-being and positive personal traits. And therefore, we need more interventions that would capture those mediating effects and become more effective in enhancing people's lives. Thank you.
Questions?
Sorry, I have a question. So one of three influencing factors on resilience is basically satisfaction with life. Have you ever considered a reverse connection of resilience influencing the meaningful life and the satisfaction?
And again, I think Dimitri kind of addressed this situation where he talked about the top-down versus bottom-up. So in the quality of life literature, again, we have three competing theories. One is the top-down, the other one is the bottom-up, and the third one is horizontal spillover, where the domains tend to affect one another. The top-down is you've got personality or personal trait, positive traits affecting life satisfaction and other constructs of well-being. And then the bottom-up is that those domain satisfaction tend to aggregate all the way that it influences, those life satisfaction types of judgments. Yes, in this particular model, in this particular study, we did not test for the reverse causation. What we're counting on is the theoretical argument that we're making, and again, the theoretical argument to us makes a lot of sense, but again, it needs to be pursued using longitudinal data and possibly bring in those types of control variables that would allow us to rule out alternative explanations.
Yeah, sorry.
Amit, and then
Amit, right?
Amit, right. So concerning this connection between personal resilience and resources or infrastructure, you might say, don't you think the model needs to make a bit of a stronger distinction between the ability to cope with a personal crisis, rather coping with national scale or crisis, for instance, earthquakes and things like that, that you need, it's a direct connection. Because if my house is not built for an earthquake.
Right. This particular study, again, based on the items that we identified from the social survey, focuses on personal adversity, not how to deal with national catastrophes.
Yeah, because when you talk about resilience and the ability to cope with a crisis, there's a difference.
Right, yeah.
National scale, regional scale.
That's a good point. So future research should definitely bring in this construct and as an additional construct to how to deal with personal adversity. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, just really quickly, thank you for your presentation. Two quick comments, and then I'm curious about your responses to it. Actually, this kind of jumps off nicely from your question. So I think it often, personal well-being is celebrated for being prioritizing the person's sovereignty to decide how their life is going. But it seems like the implication that you're suggesting here is actually, it's not that we should give people more autonomy or resources to do what they would like with those resources. Instead, we should be prioritizing personal well-being, which there seems to be a tension there. And then the second comment is, resilience, often, I think one of the problems with resilience is the fact that it does seem to be like a placating mechanism. At the top of your presentation, you said that perhaps we should have a more civil society, but what if there are truly things that we ought to notice and fight against in our societies, the ills in our societies that maybe promoting resilience in this way would actually detract from? So kind of normative assumptions that are being made here, and I'm just curious about your responses to those.
Right. For the first comment, what was the first comment?
Maybe it was the kind of tension between promoting autonomy by giving people resources versus promoting resources.
I don't think we're saying resources are not important. Absolutely, they're important. but to really put undue emphasis on resources without coming up with those positive psychology interventions that build on resources in the way resources generates more well-being is much more important than just resources. So if we exclusively look at resources and said, okay, you know, we're talking about youth, as in Linda Theron has, you know, much of her research, it says that, you know, the resources are extremely important for resilience among youth. I think we're barking up the wrong tree in the sense that, yes, resources are important, but making the connection between resources and well-being and resources and positive personal trait are much more important because these are the mediating factors. That's what we're talking about.
Okay, I might cut it there and follow up this at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you.